2 and C, or would it expand beyond that should we come up with something else?
Staff, please.
Thank you. At this point in time, it is this budget is indeed sufficient to complete the described works for these 4 sites. Any additional sites are currently not in scope of the project as it is defined right now, but could be considered.
Follow-up?
Follow-up. So should other sites come forward and we're past the budget process and we've only approved $350,000, how would we deal with additional sites that we may want looked at?
Staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So if this budget proposal is to go forward, and again focused on the sites that have been identified in the feasibility, if there are future works that require on other pieces of property, staff would prefer that those sites be identified, and we would look to use development cost charges because they do fit, and we would amend the financial plan. So there's still an opportunity in at a later date should the committee wish to explore other sites that are not identified in this feasibility study. But right now we have focused it very much on the work that has already existed to date. So we would amend the financial plan. That's really what we would be doing.
So page 111, you talk about using DCCs to do this funding. And what I'm reading from this is that if we go ahead and do the planning, but then do not go forward with the construction on any of the dams, any of the sites, that this would need to be repaid back into the DCC funds from user rates. So I'm not clear here. If we do the feasibility studies on, say, 6 or 7, I'm just picking a number, but go ahead with 1, does this still qualify to all be funded from DCCs?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So yes, the answer is yes, because we're still in that phase. If none of the sites were able to move to construction, then staff would need to bring back another future report to financially reconcile that. But at this point, we are confident as staff that one of those sites would result in a reservoir.
All right, I'm going to jump in myself here and say that I am wondering how much further we want to go down this road without taking a fresh look at our regional water plan, because $23 million is much, and the water plan did not take into account the aquifer investigations, and it needs substantial updates. And should we be broadening our water search? Should we be prioritizing other things? I'm really wondering that if we're ready to spend this money on this particular project right now. Director Theis.
Yeah, on that same vein, I was looking at the rather promising results from the well testing, and looking at the preliminary cost estimates on the well field on Church Road, which would be about $3 million. And that, doing some very easy math in my head, means that we could build anywhere from 3 to 6 well sites spread all over the coast in this fine groundwater that we might have available to us, instead of building this reservoir. And considering that the Church Road well apparently could take care of up to 50% of our deficit, I am personally in favor of putting any more spending on reservoirs at this point on hold, and kind of seeing where the results come until the results come in on the wells, and then at that point, if we for some reason can't find another place to put another well, that we might want to reopen that discussion at that point. But for now, I think for me, the sensible thing to do is to put reservoir talks on hold.
Director Pratt.
Thank you. I'm going to speak very strongly against putting any reservoir talk on hold. We are in an era of climate change, and we need to look at diversifications of sources of our water supply. We have started the groundwater sourcing, looking into the aquifers and seeing what can be done. However, it's become clear through the droughts that we have been experiencing the last number of years, the increasing environmental needs on our system as well. I think we can't hold off on investigating the feasibility of putting in a reservoir into our system. We need to have more sources for holding water. We've come across this in so many years, in so many of the past few years. I don't think we can hold off on this.
Director Segers.
Thank you. I'd agree. One of the things that we're looking at is basically a policy to look at which source we'd use first, but we need multiple sources. Right now we're dependent on one, and I know that there are people in the audience here that would put forward other options. We have to explore those as well. This is looking at providing water for us for the next basically 5 years. So this is still a stopgap measure, and there are other options that we need to put forward. But if we stop now with this one, we're, again, further behind. We won't even meet the 2025. This is going to take a few years. This is, again, a stopgap measure, and others have to be continued on with investigation. So I would say let's move this one forward as well and explore others. That doesn't mean we stop on the others.
Director Pratt.
And I would also agree that the comprehensive regional, the CRWP, does need to be really looked at because of the other climate change issues that we have had come up. But I am just going to stress again, we need to look at diversification of sources for our water for this community.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in with the, as reluctant as I want to pursue down this road of spending $350,000, the parallel process, if we go back to 2011 when these ideas first came about, or into 2007, and we haven't investigated them as a regional district, I think it's money that has to be spent in order to get the data to inform us in a year. That's kind of some of this work should have been done 10 years ago. I think people would nod their heads and say we're behind. So we're playing catch up. So I still think we should have to move ahead. As reluctant of the costs. So.
Director Beamish.
Chair, while I appreciate the town of Gibsons is not impacted by these decisions financially, we are part of the, we all have the problem of water. It's a common problem on the coast, and the town of Gibsons wants to be part of the solution and work with everybody on this, so that we need to have a comprehensive conversation. We need to include people who are directly affected by the water problems and for the long term. And to put other investigations on hold at this time, I think is be short-sighted. I think we would be always going to come back to it, and we need to move forward. We will support you with information and assistance and be part of whatever solutions you come up with. Thank you.
Director Ties.
I hear the arguments, and I do think that $350,000 is a lot of money to spend, and then to spend up to $24 million after that is even more money to spend. I'm also thinking about the environmental impacts of a reservoir, and which are considerably more than having a groundwater well, as well as the mention of diversification, where even the reservoir would still be reliant on the Chapman Creek system. So a landslide further up could wreak havoc on that reservoir as well. I think my position will continue to be to put this on hold. And but we can call the vote at this point if you're interested.
Director Lee.
I must say this is very interesting discussion. I have concerns about meeting the reduced demand, including the effects of metering. If you look at the charts over time, the effects of metering diminish. And the only way you can drive it is to increase the cost of the water, and now you'll affect it, which you can do. But I think we got to talk about user satisfaction here as well, what the population expects and wants. And then I'd like to talk about the environmental impact. I'm very optimistic about the groundwater, but I'm also pessimistic about the effects on the environment. No matter when you take water out of the environment, you're going to have an environmental impact. And from what I've been reading, aquifers of our type that drain into the saltwater, when you start taking water, the saltwater rises above the sea level. And so I have more concerns still about using an aquifer, even though it seems a silver bullet. It would seem very prudent to have a plan B when the plan A isn't sure. So I'm for reservoirs. They're proven, they work. We know the environmental impact. We can see it. That's a known. In the future, we might only be able to use our aquifers for the summer, and we're going to need more capacity of the surface water. Don't know. That's an unknown. So I'm for exploring the storage, above ground storage. Thanks.
Director Julius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess maybe it's a concern more than a question. It's the second time now I've been through like this question period that we're going through all the reports that we're getting staff, the great reports that we're getting staff to put before us. But we need completion to this item here, because now I'm worried about the next board is going to come in place and the same questions. Staff will be doing the same great work for the next board, but this, to me, it seems to be carrying on. And so that's something that I'm very worried about. We need completion to this. I hear my friend next to me wanting to put a hold on the reservoir, and that would be, in my mind, after all the work that has been done, is going to be steps backwards. So that's where I sit with this now. I sit here and I listen, and those same questions being asked, the same answers being given to us. It's like the previous board, or even the boards before that, had started something, and we need to finish those things off instead of putting holes to them and going in a backwards motion. So that's where, as I sit here and I listen, and those are the things that I fear that are happening right now, and we need completion to this water issue.
I'm just going to ask a process question to staff. The comprehensive water plan of 2013, how long did it take to put that together? If we were to start tomorrow to revise that plan, what kind of a timeline are we looking at?
Thank you for the question. Based on what I know, it took about 2.5 years to develop the plan from start to finish. And this plan, as it is currently sits, has a pretty broad scope. It includes all the water service areas. That's what was included in the metering presentation as well. It includes north-south. So it's a comprehensive water plan. But it took about 2.5 years to develop, and that included the development of models, etc., water modeling, etc. So thank you.
Director Pratt.
I'm not prepared to hold up the conversation any further, and we need to go ahead with this decision. The community has been very clear through the last few years that they want water to grow in their backyards. They want to be able to have the water to use during the summer, and I really think that we need to go through this feasibility study. And I know I'm not happy about spending a lot of money on just another study, but we haven't done this yet. We need to do it and need to find out a plan forward and then go from there when we have more information.
Director Seegers.
Doesn't think there's any more conversation on here. I'd move recommendation 2 on here, that the budget proposal for $350,000 be funded for the feasibility study as written.
Do we have any further discussion? Just flipping back to check who's voting here. So, it looks like everybody is voting except for SIGD. Am I correct on that? And Gibson's, yeah. Okay? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Would we like our votes recorded? All right. Thanks. All right. We're going to move on to the next item, which is Town of Gibson's groundwater investigation phase 2 results. Who is speaking to that, if anyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. On January 30, 2018, the SRD received a letter from the Town of Gibson regarding the results of the groundwater investigation phase 2. This letter included 4 requests to the SRD, and the letter is attached to this report. The purpose of this report is to provide a staff response to this request for the board's consideration. Staff would be pleased to answer any questions the committee might have.
Director Beamish.
Chair, thank you. I'll just speak to the report and the letter. After the discussion, after the letter was written, of course, the SRD did agree that they would not proceed with the Mahan Road site for the well. We are working with our staff and staffs together on this issue. As we move forward, we foresee, and I know the presentation that our administrator would like to come and make to the board, foresees even the opportunity of assisting once we change our Zone 3 water and we are off of Zone 3 onto our own wells, that we may have capacity also to support the regional district, the area with water during the drought seasons, so that from our aquifer, so that we see this as a win-win for everybody. We appreciate that there is a well drilled now that would be served for monitoring in our area, which would be very useful. But going forward, I'd invite the board to wait until we receive the presentation from our CAO and learn more about what we're doing in Gibson's and the aquifer and how the aquifer is being dealt with in Gibson's. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I noticed there were 4 requests in that letter. 1 has been taken care of. Number 2 indicates that we should wait for a report before we actually turn this over to the town for responsibility for monitoring that. So one question on that would be, what would the report tell us that we don't know now? The 3rd one, I understand, there will be a referral coming to us. And then the 4th one, it's about resuming the bulk water agreement review discussions. My question there, if we look at number 4, it says, staff support resuming them when there is more information. What information are we waiting for in order to resume the discussions? So 2 questions. Thank you.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair, for the questions. With respect to the report as outlined in number 2, given the location of the Mahan well in the aquifer and the fact that we're going to work together with the town on a collaborative groundwater management zone and plan on the entire area. It might be an interest that the RCRD might have in that well as well, or the data. So maybe there are opportunities for a shared well or shared monitoring well instead of that it is only Town of Gibson owned. So there might be an option there. There might be opportunities for the well data to be co-managed and the well to be co-managed by both Town of Gibson and SRD. And at this point in time, we have not been able to have or discussions with the town staff on that issue, or to identify or do the assessments ourselves on what would be our benefit of, what would be the interest of SRD in using those monitoring data. And with respect to number 4, the information is really about, we're getting more and more information now from the town staff on Zone 3 and their plan. So there's really, that's now way more defined than it was a couple of months ago. So I think there is more opportunity now to restart that discussion again and include that information in that.
So does staff need direction from the board to resume those discussions at this point? Or will they just happen?
We can restart the discussions. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I think we can move on to the next item, which is report from Mr. Shea on the rainwater harvesting rebate program.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary on the first year of the Rainwater Harvesting Rebate Program. The Rainwater Harvesting Rebate Program supports the water conservation approach outlined in the Comprehensive Regional Water Plan. The program offers a $500 rebate for cisterns with a minimum storage size of 4,500 liters, which is approximately 1,000 imperial gallons. There is an application process to secure a rebate prior to incurring the expenses of a cistern as well. The program was launched in November of 2018, and 49 rebates were approved in the regional water system. No applications were received in the North and South Pender water systems. The 31 cisterns installed to date have resulted in 510 cubic meters of storage, increasing the drought resilience of the community. And these cisterns also act as a visible prompt for water stewardship, which is known to change behavior. At this time, no changes are recommended for the 2019 program. Thank you.
Director Theis.
Thank you, Mr. Shea, and I think it's a very good initiative by the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I wish it had been around when I put my rainwater tanks in, but anyway, my question is, what was the cost in the past year, and what's the cost in the ongoing year, and I guess is it 50 a year that we're looking at?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. The budget is for 50 rebates in the regional water area, as well as 3 in North Pender water system and 4 in the South Pender water system.
I have a question, and that is there any plan to follow up, say a year or 2 years down the road, to find out the effectiveness of the systems that are installed and whether people felt that it was a valuable experience? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's desires to continue to follow up with the systems to see what the performance is like, and we do have water meter data on the electoral area systems as well to see program impact in future years.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I know that some people in the community indicated that for them, the size was a little large, and they were wondering if it was possible to do a program with a smaller size. And then I'm wondering how the 90 days works, given that it takes some time to go through our processes on our end. Are applicants having difficulty meeting the requirements of installation, submitting the claim form, receipts, photos, etc., within 90 days?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. The size was discussed extensively in the design phase with neighboring jurisdictions and looking at average garden requirements for a residential garden, and that's where the 4,500 liters came from. A smaller size, especially now that we have water meter data, would not provide a lot of resilience benefits, which is part of the objective here. And with regards to the second question, the 90-day window, there is a lot of construction activity happening on the coast, so there is there is a lot of busyness around that front, but in most cases, people have been able to meet the 90-day construction window, and we're working with all these applicants to see how we can support them.
Director Ties.
Yeah, just anecdotally, the rainwater system that I have is about 2,500 gallons, so it's 2.5 times the size of what the rainwater rebate program would be. And if 2 years ago we put our lawn in fresh, and I had to basically keep my lawn wet all the time, and that whole system was done in about a week. Yeah, if you want to make it a smaller system, it essentially will probably do nothing for our summer storage. So the more water, the better, essentially.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I've got a question about the design of the program. It's only for rainwater storage. And the assumption in the report talks about 3 rainfall cycles during our drought period. There's an assumption there. So I noticed Nanaimo, they just is looking at it from a storage point of view. So I'm thinking, I've got this tank. We're going to stage 2 watering restrictions. There's no rainfall in sight for the next 3 months. There's water at stage 2. What was the rationale to not allow potable water to be filled into these storage tanks for future storage, in light that we might not have a rainfall event in which to fill up the tanks? But if we have adequate spillover from at stage 2 watering restrictions to fill those tanks with potable water.
Staff, please.
Thank you for the question. At the March Infrastructure Services Committee meeting, we will have a presentation on the evaluation of the drought management plan from last year. So staff will make note of this question, and we'll include it in the evaluation of that plan and bring it forward in a report at that time. Thank you.
Director Toth.
Thank you. Just from my own personal experience, that really only becomes an issue on the initial fill. My tanks at home right now are full, so I won't be using any potable water for them. So.
Seeing no further questions? Fine. I think we shall move on to Annex E, Water Treatment and Distribution Services Report.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. This report is in response to a recommendation made during Round 1 budget meeting on February 4th, 2019. At that time, the committee requested more details in support of a budget proposal for additional staffing resources within the Utility Services Division. This report provides further information on the existing staff and complement their duties, their responsibilities, and the demand on the division as a whole. It also provides a rationale for the budget proposal, which will be presented at the March 4, 2019 Round 2 budget meeting. Staff would be able to answer any questions the committee might have.
I'm not seeing any questions. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think most of us have toured the treatment plant now, and we recognize that our water system, the whole process from beginning to end, is becoming more complicated. And this was information that I think we as a board recognized, supported the hiring or the expansion of the staffing, and we wanted to make this information available to the public, so it was pretty transparent to them. So thank you for the detailed information.
Director Ties.
Yeah, and when I was contacted this week by one of the residents in Roberts Creek and being concerned about the tax increase, and I was able to point him to this report, which was a very good rationale behind some of the taxation increases that we're looking at. And I also want to point out that the complexity of our water system is increasing, and also the size of our water system. And a lot of that can be attributed to climate change, and so I just wanted to once again point out that we're no longer in a status quo, and we need to put some real dollars to make up for what climate change is bringing towards us. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further speakers, I think that we can move on to the next report, which is the contract award for Chapman Creek Bridge water main replacement. Do we have an introduction?
Yes, I can certainly provide the introduction. Thank you, McMahon, for allowing me to do so. This report provides an overview of the results of the tendering process for the repair of a failing water main underneath the Chapman Bridge. The water main has widespread corrosion, and staff already performed an emergency repair on the crack in 2017. 3 bids were received and evaluated by staff, and TJK Irrigation Ltd. was the lowest in price and was compliant with all set requirements. Staff recommend to award the contract to TJK Irrigation in the amount of $196,891. Thank you.
Do I see anybody to make this motion? Moved? Seconded? It's on the floor. Okay, questions? Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I just wouldn't mind a little bit of background on the 2020 and 17 critical asset failure. It's probably one of the worst times of years to have a critical asset failure for a major water pipe going across the road. So I'm kind of wondering what the asset was, the asset management data for this pipe in place before that critical asset failure? Was that known, like the condition of the pipe?
Staff, please.
Thank you for the question. At that time, as indicated during previous committee meetings, also by our CFO, our asset management has been on improving, and in 2017 this was not on our radar as being in such a state that it required that emergency repair.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I noticed in the report that it says that construction should be completed by May 2019. It's a short time frame, given that we're in February. So do we wait for budget, or once we approve this, does that move forward? First question. And then second, will it require highway closures? And if so, how do we deal with that?
Staff, please.
Thank you for both questions. The first question is, There is a base operational budget which would cover this project, so we would not have to wait until budget approval to get started. And the second one is there will be highway closures, one lane at the start of the project and at the final phase of the project. And we will work with the contractor to ensure that that final phase won't overlap with the May long weekend.
Any further discussion? Director Seegers.
Just another indication that we need an alternate route over that Chapman.
I think everybody agrees. May I call the vote on this? All in favor, please. Any opposed? Thank you. Next. We are up to the brass water service fittings. Report, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. This report provides an overview of the results of the tendering process for the supply and delivery of brass fittings used for the maintenance and repairs on our water and wastewater infrastructure. The fittings will be held as inventory, and the parts will be charged to the specific functions once the fittings are actually used by staff on those facilities. The tendering process was for a 3-year contract. 5 bids were received and evaluated, and Flowcore was the lowest in price and compliant with all set requirements. Staff therefore recommend to award the contract to Flowcore in the amount of $120,631. And staff would be able to answer any questions.
Director Seegers.
I think this is pretty straightforward. I'll make recommendation 2 and 3 as indicated in the report.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. We have it seconded. And question from Director Hiltz.
Just a question for staff about there's the town of Gibsons and the district of Sechelt. Town of Gibsons has water as well as wastewater. Sechelt does mostly just wastewater. Was there looking at in terms of like how the garbage contract was to see if there's other economies of scale with the other local governments to share in this tendering process or the RFP process?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So not in this particular RFP because that process had already been undertaken, but I do understand that there has been some more conversations with staff around other opportunities. In particular, I know the District of Sechelt staff have reached out to see where there's economies of scale. So yeah, good progress in that, but not particularly with this one.
Seeing no further comments, may I call the vote? All in favor, please. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. And we move on now to the Air Quality Monitoring Station request for support.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. So this report is just brought forward for request, and you can see the attachments articulating that the support is being sought, and so it's just here for the committee's consideration.
Would anyone like to move a letter of support for an air quality monitoring station? We have a motion. Do we have a seconder? And then we can have some discussion. Any discussion? No, it seems quite straightforward. Yes, we will. All right, vote. All in favor, please. Thank you very much. Right, send the letter. Okay, next we have arena floor surface scheduling. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. On January 31st, the board directed staff to report back in February with further details regarding feasibility, financial implications, and schedule relating to an extended ice season. Staff have also received feedback from user groups on a draft spring schedule that was released at the end of January, which informed this report. The report clarifies the requests made by some ICE groups, outlines technical considerations, and notes that when ICE is provided, dictates where it is provided. And where it is provided has impacts for users and for programs, events, and for revenue. Taking all factors into consideration, staff recommend that, and there are a number of recommendations, that ICE be provided through the end of April at Sunshine Coast Arena, that for May of 2019, ICE not be provided due to the planned chiller replacement project at Sunshine Coast Arena, that beginning in August of 2019 and looking forward, that August ICE be offered at Gibsons and Area Community Centre, April and May ICE be offered at the Sunshine Coast Arena, and that a decision on June ICE be deferred. In order to manage financial impacts associated with these changes, the current procedure of operating with ICE only when variable costs are recovered from user group bookings be continued and affirmed, and staff will monitor and report back through the variance process on financial implications. And in the recommended schedule, ICE would be offered in April, May, and August, and provided when bookings address variable costs. And finally, in order to support quality planning and support all user groups and event organizers with their development goals, process improvement, especially with respect to timing of schedule development, be undertaken. An improved planning timeline will also assist staff with planning to mitigate impacts on dry floor programs, events, and bookings. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from Director Tice?
First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Hall, for all your work in this regard. That was definitely not an easy task, and I think you've done a fine job. I'm wondering about the variable cost and having to be met, and I'm wondering if we should just give a little bit of a pocket of or a cushion of safety where we say that it's within 90% of variable cost or something like that, rather than it has to be exactly met in order to guarantee ICE. So that's the only question that I have.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. From staff's perspective, that level of guidance may not be required at this time, and staff would monitor actual revenue versus operating costs and report back as noted in the report. In practice, there are always slight additions or reductions to bookings through factors such as weather, et cetera. And so a penny for penny accounting is not always practically achievable anyway. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. Just a clarification in the recommendations. The one that says in that August ICE be offered at Gibsons Aquatic Center or Gibsons Area Community Center, would that be starting in 2019 and going forward? Is that what the implication is?
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Yes, that's what's implied. Thank you.
Director Tice.
Yeah, my question is, in the report it says that if we do offer August ICE at Gibsons, that we might have to truck in the water, and what is in order to not draw from the Chapman system, and I'm wondering what the increased cost of that would be, and as opposed to doing that without, or by just either using the Chapman system or maybe deferring that to next year when I would hope the Gibsons Aquatic Center, not the Gibsons Community, or GAC, let's just call it GAC, whatever, it just rolls off the tongue. When GAC is hopefully part of the Zone 3 transfer and then is supplied by the aquifer anyway.
Staff, please.
Thank you, Chair. There would be a number of factors that would influence the cost of such an operation, including from where water is sourced and any community support that might be received for such an operation. Staff would seek to be as efficient as possible in making that type of operation happen. When a similar process was researched at the Sunshine Coast Arena, the costs were in the single thousands of dollars on the basis of making use of community support and also equipment that was available in the SCRD inventory at that time. Both of those factors could change for a future scenario. Thanks.
Director Beamish?
Just to clarify the proposal now, then, what is the proposal with regards to the ice? How long will the ice be in the Gibsons Area Community Center for this year, and how does that meet the needs of the skating club and other users?
Staff, please.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So for 2019, ice would remain in the Gibsons and Area Community Center until March 17th, while ice would be provided through the end of August at Sunshine Coast Arena. And then ice could be installed as early as August 1st in the Gibsons and Area Community Center, as recommended in the report, subject to variable cost recovery. Thank you.
Could I just clarify that? Mr. Hall, you mentioned ice till the end of August in Sunshine Coast Arena?
Staff, please.
Apologies if I misspoke. Ice to the end of April at the Sunshine Coast Arena, with ice available again as soon as August 1st. So the dry floor period at GAC would be March 17th to at least August 1st. And to follow through on the second part of the director's question, based on feedback received on draft schedules for facilities for the spring and summer, that arrangement seems to best respond to the needs of those seeking both ice and dry floor time in our facilities. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. So this schedule as presented in these recommendations, and I'd look to make a modification to the one about GAC, would provide certainty for the remainder of 2019 and 2020 and potentially beyond that at this point? Is that what we're looking at?
Staff, please.
Yes, and beyond. Thank you.
Yes, I commend the idea of improving the scheduling process, and I presume that part of that is starting it earlier. Would that be? I'm just curious about what the improvements are, or whether you know yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal, as roughly described and noted as for discussion with user groups, that's included in the body of the report, actually takes SCRD back to the process described in the 2011 space allocation policy, and that has the heavy lifting of annual scheduling done in the summer, which would address many of the requests that staff heard during recent stakeholder dialogue with user groups. But staff are keen to test that approach with user groups, and if refinements are needed, and indeed if policy changes are required, as noted in the report, they would be brought back to the committee for decision. Thank you.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'd like to make the recommendations as presented with one addition, and that August ice be offered at GAC starting in 2019 going forward. But otherwise, recommendations as presented.
Seconder, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Sorry.
Sorry.
Do we, all right.
No, just on the further discussion, I still have to speak in support of the youth users of the ice, that we're forcing people to leave the coast to continue a experience that we've given them. And I really find that very difficult. I know in the future we need to address that. And I'm wondering if there's any way then that's, it would probably be much out of shape, but there's a cost to that. And is there any way of supplementing that cost through the regional district of that, of leaving the coast and having to take time away from obviously school, but it's also time away and additional costs off the coast. And I don't know if we've ever looked at that, and I don't know if it's even possible, but there's a cost to young people having to travel, having to go likely with an adult escort off the coast and use another facility to maintain their training and maintain their level of skill, and that's really the concern. It's unfortunate when we offer something and we can't follow through with it and complete the package, and that's really what was frustrating here with regards to ice users.
All right. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I haven't lost sight of the fact that we are looking for more dry floor user space, and some of those user groups have reached out to me already. So they're away, but they're going to be coming back, and we'll further that, which could then potentially impact this down the road. I think this is a good compromise at this point. I like the fact in there the decision on the June ice in future years be deferred, but I'm sure it's going to come back when it's feasible.
Director Beamish.
I think Director Seeger makes a good point, and perhaps after these recommendations are dealt with, a further recommendation could be that staff be directed to consider opportunities for additional outdoor dry floor space. Or do we already have that recommendation?
Staff, please.
Thanks. I'll just jump in. The round 2 budget is coming forward on March the 4th, and there is a budget proposal that the committee will consider at that time.
Director Toews?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we do have that budget proposal coming. So yeah.
All right. I think it's time to call the vote on the motion. All in favor, please. Any opposed? Thank you. Passes. I believe that takes us to the end of our report, and we now get to communications. We have the letter from the Honourable Minister George Heyman. Chair Pratt.
I'll just make a motion to receive the communications first before we start to discuss them.
Seconder, please. All in favor? Thank you. Discussion on the letter from the Minister. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. I think to start off is one of the comments I'd heard in passing from a couple of the directors is crafting a response to the Minister. And so I'd just like to put that out to the board members if they'd what the response from the board would look like, and then of course if the board does want to craft a response, then we would probably want to move it to the board meeting this afternoon.
Do we have any further thoughts on this? Director Toews.
I don't know if we actually need to make a response. I don't personally see the need to respond to it at this point. I think it was fairly clear, and I think I don't object to what the decision that came down, and I also don't I don't want to congratulate the minister for whatever they've been doing. I think it was a fair decision, and at this point in time, and I don't think we need to respond to it. Thanks.
Director Hills.
I like being courteous to the ministers. I think the SCRD has done a tremendous amount of work that can be addressed, and I think it can help the public also to understand a response to the letter. So I would be speaking in favor of drafting a response and highlighting the aquifer project, the raw water reservoir, the work that's going on to show that the regional district is really trying to find alternative solutions. So I would speak in favor of drafting a letter, a nice letter too. These are our calls. We need to respect them. And
Director Beamish.
I think a response should actually open the door to future cooperation with the province and actually asking them to come to the table and work with us in finding our water solutions, because there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of protecting the watersheds, protecting the areas, so that and they've taken one major opportunity off the table. We now need to have them come to the table and help us find solutions.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. And in that letter, also indicate that we would cheerfully accept funding.
Director Lee.
There's two things that about this letter that we got, and I think we should include in our response. The first being that we as a regional district felt that this was an appropriate thing to do, even though it was people before us. So they seem to indicate they know more about our area than us and how to solve the problem. So I think we should invite them to the table and help us instead of throwing big rocks. The second thing is, I don't know if it's saying absolutely no development in the park or just don't draw it down below the natural water table. I don't know if that's the case either. And I think we need to say we're desperately looking for alternatives, but we don't want to close the door on revisiting this. I wonder if we had put a positive question to our residents with full understanding of the financial implications, if in fact we heard from a vocal 5% rather than a silent 95%. So regardless of our thoughts on development in a park, my understanding is that that park was made to ensure that we had a source of protected water, and it has served its purpose. Our watershed is quite clean there. But if in fact we can't use it to its full extent, we failed in our objective in my mind. And this is a preliminary thought. I'm no expert. What are we, 100 days into understanding the issue? But that's my thoughts right now. Thank you.
So we're going to write and say, thank you for your letter, please send money. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think there's another piece to that is the presentation that Gibson's is coming forward with regards to the regional governance model that we're looking at, and that will require some provincial support in legitimacy and information, etc. So I think that's another piece of it, that we include that. But yes, the money piece should be also mentioned.
Director Ties.
I personally wouldn't go down the rabbit hole of saying that we want to revisit this thing in the future. At this point, I think there's some mixed opinions amongst the board here as to whether the drawdown was a good idea in the first place, and I don't want to have that discussion now.
Director Hills.
The cooperation side, the aquifer mapping that the province is doing, I think also plays in the discussion the Council Director Seegers was talking about. So I think those are the things to emphasize, is what they can bring to the table and assist with the process that we're going through.
I'm just going to suggest that a number of the points raised are good ones, and I don't think that this is desperately urgent. We could perhaps take a draft and give it some more consideration and not have to write it this afternoon. I mean, this letter took a long time coming, so I don't think there's necessarily any desperate urgency in our responding. What would be the best way to move it forward procedurally? Chair, Director Pratt.
I'll make a motion that the board write a response letter to Minister Heyman, and that it reflect the comments that were brought forward at the infrastructure meeting of February 21st, 2019, and be circulated to board prior to being sent. And okay.
We have a seconder. Do we have any further thoughts? That staff? Yes.
Staff are fine. We understand, and I agree that we can go through the normal process as opposed to trying. I was looking at it, trying to see if you were going to rush this to this afternoon. So this gives us some time to make sure we have the motion right and the letter right to meet the request of the committee.
So, can I call the motion? All in favor? Great. No one opposed? Excellent. We have one.
Sorry, Chair. Staff didn't want to interrupt at all. Just in regards to this, not to the letter, but to the project itself. Staff will be doing some analysis. Now that we do have a decision, we do need to do some analysis, and a report will be coming back at a committee meeting to talk about next steps, whether that be reconciliation of funds, whether that be the environmental flow impacts, how the operational issues. Now that we have a decision, staff will bring back some more information.
Just personally, I really would like to understand what our next steps are going to be, because I'm hearing from people that while it may be important to investigate Chapman, we should be throwing the net as wide as we can in our search for water options and diversification. So I think Director Lee.
I absolutely agree with you, and of course I think about Pender Harbour and our dependency on the surface water, which I in turn don't think you should have all your eggs in one basket. And so hopefully our research on the use of aquifers and groundwater here will inform the entire coast direction, because I think that's important. We are one coast.
Good. We have one last item of correspondence. I don't know if anybody has any comments, thoughts. I don't. Director Pratt?
My only question to the board would be whether or not you would like a response crafted to this one as well, or other than just a thank you. Or I think we've addressed some of these in the meeting today.
There being no request for action in the letter, I didn't think that, other than thank you for your considered letter. Yes. All right. Well, it's CC'd to a lot of us, so how about from the board? And it's in the package, so it was intended for all of our benefit. Yeah. Okay. Is that an action, or is? Yeah, okay. Okay. We are down at new business, which I don't think we have any of. We have no in camera. We can move to adjourn. Yay. Yay. Okay, a race to adjourn. Everybody in favor? Great. Mr. Eckford, do you have anything for us? Ah, doggone.